working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. Joining me today is Charlene from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon and good afternoon to everyone. I am Charlene Navaja from your EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, a private Thai hospital ordered to stop advertising COVID-19 vaccinations for sale.
Sri Lanka welcomes first tourists since pandemic.
And we have a very special feature today wherein Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Yap, will discuss with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey.
The basis for choosing these 9 modes.
Private Thai hospital ordered to stop advertising COVID-19 vaccinations for sale. So here's our EBC Bangkok, Thailand Bureau, Faye Barte. Faye?
According to the Thai PBS World, the Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha is requiring himself to do the rapid test of COVID-19 because the Prime Minister has been to many places or many areas here in the country here in Thailand because he is actually performing his duties. So because he performs a lot of activities to different areas, he decided to have or to conduct a rapid test to check also if he got the COVID-19. And another reason why he wants to do that, several days ago, there were 6 officials or government officials that had positive to the COVID-19, and that is in the government house. So he also wants to check his condition. And another thing that he wants to say to the public is, he wants to say to the public that we need to be careful when we are actually looking for some information about the vaccine, about the vaccine, because there is a recent issue that there is one hospital here in Bangkok that they advertise about the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, but it happened to have a misunderstanding. So another group of people, they believe something about information that is not really the correct one. So it is actually misleading. So the Prime Minister wanted and urged the people to verify first under the Food and Drug Administration. Back to you, Charlene.
Thank you so much for your update, Faye. You stay safe and stay alert.
Thank you, Charlene. Likewise, this is Faye Barte reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And to Sri Lanka welcomes first tourists since pandemic. Here's our EBC correspondent in Sri Lanka, Vanessa Viloria Silva. Vanessa?
Hi, Charlene. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi. A special charter flight carrying 186 tourists, including 20 kids, from Ukraine landed at the Matala International Airport yesterday, December 28. They are the first group of tourists to arrive in the island since March of this year, when the airports were closed in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. The batch of foreign tourists who arrived who arrive will be staying in the country for around 10 to 14 days, according to the Ministry of Tourism. All the tourists who landed yesterday had been PCR tested within 72 hours prior to their departure. They are also subjected to similar testing upon arrival. Afterwards, there will be yet another test done after 7 days, and locals are not allowed to visit the areas where the tourist stays. The flight was warmly welcomed with a water salute. Cultural dancing performances had been organized in collaboration with Sri Lankan Tea Board to welcome and entertain the tourists. With the eagerly awaited reopening of borders for international tourists, Sky Up Airlines was the first airline to carry international tourists to Sri Lanka. The airline operating has plans to operate charter flights up to the end of March 2021. Back to you, Charlene.
That's a really good news for Sri Lanka, Vanessa, but still, stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Reporting live from Sri Lanka, this is Vanessa Villoria Silva, and we live in interesting times.
And for our next feature, we have Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Yap, to discuss with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey. Mr. Dr. Yap is a rising star in the Philippine econometrics and data science circles. He holds a decade of experience in academic research, data analysis, and policy strategy. Let's listen in.
And what are these 9 modules? Why were they chosen? Why were these modules chosen to have the survey conducted around them? And what was the basis for choosing these 9 modules?
So, Ma'am Alma, the Pahayag End of the Year survey is the latest in an ongoing series of Pahayag surveys conducted po by Publicus Asia. And the Pahayag EOY was prompted in part by the social, political, and economic changes set in motion by the COVID pandemic. In addition po, ma'am, the Pahayag EOY was motivated by the recognition of the imminent reconfiguration of the political landscape as we head into 2021 and, of course, election year 2022. Modules, we have everything from optimism about the economy heading into 2021, personal financial prospects, working arrangements both during the pandemic and beyond the lockdowns. We also have scorecards for agencies dealing with the pandemic. We have issue scorecards. We also have predisposition. We recently released our 2020 end-of-year predisposition rankings for president, vice president, senator. We also have media habits post-pandemic. We also have emotional quotient of leaders, as well as the top issues on everybody's minds as of the moment.
Can you get me up to speed with your key findings on this EOY po?
Ma'am, so for that po, ma'am, I can pick out several of our slides from our full presentation on the main modules po. So if we look into optimism about the economy, employment, and working arrangements, we find that roughly 3/4 of the sample can be viewed as optimistic about their financial prospects, personal financial prospects, as they head into 2021. So if you look at the table, ma'am, only 5% of respondents indicated that they expect their financial prospects to worsen in 2021. If we frame these results within the context of the hardships endured by many Filipinos in 2020, an argument can be made that these findings stem at least in part from the mentality that 2021 will likely not be worse than 2020, instead of emanating purely from optimism derived from the imminent arrival of a new year. So it isn't exactly that they may think that their financial situation will improve drastically compared to, say, 2019 into 2020, but rather they have gotten into a situation that is markedly worse. A lot of people may have gotten into a situation that is markedly worse than what they are used to, and they think that 2021 cannot be worse than 2020. So aggregated optimism appears to be higher among those aged 18 through 49 than among those aged 50 and above. Yung mga bata po yung mga mas optimistic. Aggregated optimism among the younger group hovers around the 75% mark, whereas optimism in the older groups hovers around the 60% mark. Another point of interest po, ma'am, a little less than half of the respondents indicated that they are working full-time. So the share of full-time work rises to 60% in NCR and drops to 38% in Southern Luzon. These numbers suggest that job growth or job recovery rates are uneven or vary from one super region to the next. Additionally, these may be indicative of substantive differences in industry-level resilience or adaptability. It is possible that the Southern Luzon labor market, as well as some of its bigger industries, are having difficulty adapting to the emerging new normal economy. Another point of interest is that around a fifth of the respondents can be described as underemployed, given that they are currently employed but also looking for work. Part of this may be attributable to the pivot of a large part of the labor market towards the gig economy. While it does bolster overall employment, the gig economy's nature and inherent insecurity means that a substantial portion of the jobs that it creates would not be deemed as full-time jobs by many members of the labor force. Finally, another fifth of respondents can be described as unemployed, with 70% or the majority of these people having some level of work experience. Ito po, ma'am, nakabox.
Okay.
While this unemployment rate can be viewed to be high, it is an improvement from our 25% unemployment recorded in the Pahayag SONA survey conducted last August. So this in turn suggests that there are signs of an economic recovery as well as a realignment of the labor market according to the demands of the new normal. So linking back to what I said earlier, what's happening is that there may be a recovery, but a large part of that recovery is underemployed. A large part of the labor market remains underemployed. So people are recovering their jobs, but a lot of those people are only getting part-time work.
Okay.
So nevertheless, even with these signs of recovery, it is important to emphasize the observation that close to 40% of respondents are either looking for work or looking for more work. So the hope for recovery, if it is in fact ongoing, needs to be sustained over a much longer period of time to recover the ground lost over the course of the pandemic and the lockdowns. This might be of interest po, ma'am. So over 40% of respondents indicated that they would prefer to spend most, if not all, of their work weeks in the office. Marami na pong gustong bumalik sa opisina. A little over a quarter would prefer to spend most, if not all, of their work weeks at home. Ito po, ma'am. These suggest a latent but burgeoning desire for a return to normalcy. It is also worth mentioning that there are more males who want to go back into the office for most, if not all, of the work week. If you look at this slide, ma'am, the difference is noticeable, especially in this last row over here. So again, we can look at these numbers a little bit more in depth. So while it is true that working from home has its attractions and its advantages, it also poses challenges for many households. Some may have trouble working at home because of a lack of a proper working space, and others may have issues with family members or housemates interrupting their work or their focus at inopportune times. So for our scorecards po ma'am, it's the Office of the President and the IATF at the top, as they both garnered aggregate approval ratings above 60%. So the rating of the Office of the President is in line with its Pahayag SONA rating, whereas the rating of the IATF is a dramatic improvement from its Pahayag SONA approval rating of approximately 50%. So the other agencies in this, at least in this top half of the rankings, are all above 50%. The bottom half would be those on 50% or below 50%. And notable agencies here in terms of total disapproval would be DepEd, CHED, and the Office of the Vice President. This section, we have essentially a scorecard on national issues. So the implementation of the National ID project registered the highest level of aggregate approval at close to 80%. This suggests that the National ID proposal is garnering more and more support heading into 2021. Beyond this, projects, advocacies, and positions that were expected to provide benefits registered high levels of approval and low levels of disapproval. These include the government-sponsored COVID vaccine, the Bayanihan Act 2, the Skyway, and the upgrading of regional airports. So when asked about the state of the country, over half of the respondents indicated that the country is either strong or very strong. As far as sentiments are concerned, more than half of respondents indicated that they were feeling hopeful about the Philippines heading into 2021. A little over 40% indicated that they felt anxious. These two were the most often cited feelings regarding the Philippines, suggesting that the bulk of respondents can be viewed to be cautiously optimistic for 2021. Senator Go is a distant second, but scored markedly higher than third-place Senator Poe. It is worth mentioning that Senator Go managed to increase his approval rating by roughly 10 points, from 42% in our Pahayag SONA survey last August. Senators Poe, Lacson, Marcos, and Cayetano can be viewed to belong in the same tier with comparable approval and disapproval ratings. So Senators Gordon, Angara, Zubiri, De La Rosa, and Gatchalian round up the remainder of the top 12 with ratings ranging from 37.5 to 40%. It is worth noting that the disapproval of first-time Senator De La Rosa is high at 30%. Senators Villar and Revilla have comparable levels of disapproval at around 45%. It is of note, however, that both appear to have gained some ground in terms of goodwill, as their total disapproval levels decreased from their levels back in August. Senator Villar improved from 56% to 44%, while Senator Revilla improved from 58% to 46%. Opposition Senators Pangilinan, Hontiveros, and Trilon are found in this list in these positions from 30 to 32%. Senator De Lima registered by far the highest disapproval rating at 60%. In terms of trust, we have President Duterte again at the top with a total high trust rating of 62%. He also registered the lowest total low trust rating at 16%. These numbers constitute improvements from his scores in August. Senate President Soto recorded the second highest total high trust rating at 30% and is again statistically tied with Chief Justice Peralta with the second lowest total low trust rating. Senate President Soto registered a massive increase in total high trust as he went up from 22% in August to 30% in December. VP Robredo registered the highest overall total low trust rating at a shade below 42%. Again, her numbers are in line with her numbers last August.
Dr. Yap?
Ma'am?
Yes. I have a question with regard to the data on national issues.
Yes po, ma'am.
I guess when you finish.
Sige po, ma'am.
Okay.
Given the results for social media, it follows that more and more people will be disinclined to read news on printed media. Print media news would likely find it difficult, if not impossible, to compete with social media news, given that the latter has advantages in terms of cost, convenience, frequency, and immediacy. Social media, as the name implies, even has a social element. People can share, post, and comment on social media news articles instead of just reading these articles on print. These results suggest that the political campaigning landscape is changing dramatically as we head into 2021. It is worth mentioning that roughly 60% of respondents indicated that they use Facebook for at least 4 hours a day, with almost half indicating that they use it over 5 hours a day. These results suggest that these platforms will play major roles in advertising and campaigning moving forward.
All right, and we'll be back with the second part of this interview right after this break.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Turuan din natin ang mga bata ng tamang paghugas ng mga kamay. Basain ang kamay ng tubig at lagyan ng sabon. Kuskusin ang iyong mga palad. Gayon din ang pagitan ng mga daliri. Pati na ang likod ng mga palad at daliri. Ganon din ang iyong hinlalaki. Kasama ang mga dulo ng iyong mga daliri. Pagkatapos ay iyong kalapulsuhan. Gawin ito ng kahit 20 segundo. Pagkatapos ay banlawan ng tubig at patuyuin.
The search for the best continues! Tagi sa Nanggaling Part 2 is now accepting audition entries. Kung ikaw ay 21 to 59 years old at may angking galing sa pagsayaw, mapasolo, duo o grupo man, magpadala na ng audition entry. Narito ang mga guidelines. Para makapagpasa ng entry sa dancing category, contact Shing at 0995-880-8004. Ito na ang pagkakataon mo para maging tagisan ng galing grand winner at manalo ng 2 million pesos. Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, i-like ang Tagisan ng Galing Facebook page. Kaya sali na!
Hello there. Imagine Dami got the virus, and she infected 2 more. And those 2 infected a lot more of people. And it goes on until it became an epidemic. But what if Dami stayed at home? Then those 2 wouldn't have contracted the virus. Then those people would have not been infected. This is not just your battle, it's everyone's, and you can be a huge help. Follow social distancing, or better yet, stay at home.
Mga mahalagang pangyayari na naganap di lamang sa bansa, kundi maging sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, ating balikan sa Pilipinas 2020. Tinutukan ng Eagle News Team sa iba't ibang sulok ng bansa, pati na sa ipayong dagat. Pilipinas 2020! Hatid sa inyo ng Net25, Radyo Agila, EagleNews.ph at ng Eagle News Live. Pilipinas 2020! Abangan! Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced. Not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Agila Pilipinas! A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Aguila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Aguila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to thank our help outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through EagleNews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
We continue with the second part of our feature with Chief Data Scientist of Publicus Asia, Dr. David Yap, to discuss with us the findings of the nationwide 2020 Pahayag End of the Year survey. Let's listen in.
Based on this, if you were to formulate a list of advice or recommendations based on these findings, what would be topmost in your priorities for 2021? Would it be COVID? And in what terms would you recommend improvements based on your data?
Ma'am, ang background ko po kasi is economics and statistics. So I have a personal bias leaning towards on ensuring that we get our economy back on track. While I'm sure that we all could acknowledge the threat of COVID, I would think that I would personally labas ko lang po yung issues, ma'am. I would personally tend to favor focusing on the economy and jobs, because while COVID remains a threat that we should not underestimate, it is, I would think, equally important not to underestimate the cost in terms of welfare, of human welfare, of human lives, of losing jobs, of losing livelihood, and of economic contractions. So if we consider this in terms of trade-offs, if we keep on constraining economic activity, if we keep on locking down, if we keep on adding restrictions that hamper an economic recovery, then what would happen is that these would cost people jobs, business opportunities, and if that happens, then we might reduce the risk of COVID, of contracting COVID, or we can reduce the rate at which COVID spreads, but people may not have jobs with which to keep themselves and their families alive. And at the same time, I think at this point in time, we have learned enough about COVID that we now have adopted and adapted several innovations and protocols that would allow most of the labor market to go back to work safely. So there are now safety protocols for going back to work. In terms of COVID risk, we now know, or we now have a better idea of who are the people in our country who are at most risk of contracting COVID, as well as contracting complications because of COVID, particularly fatal complications. So from our research, and these resources are readily available online, we know that the people who are aged 50, 55 and above, those with pre-existing conditions such as hypertension, obesity, and other heart problems are the ones who are at most risk of developing complications that are rooted in their pre-existing conditions that can be aggravated to a very severe degree by COVID. So having said that, I would think that we are now equipped with the information necessary to open up, at least within the bounds of the parameters set by our safety protocols, to open up the Philippine economy and work towards recovering the ground lost during the onset of the pandemic and the accompanying lockdowns in the months that followed.
Okay, so with regards to, as you said, as your own personal priorities, economy and jobs, given the Filipinos' current choices for leaders in 2022, for example, Sara Duterte, Bongbong Marcos, Isko Dumagoso, and Leni Robredo, what do you see as the Philippines' future in terms of the economy and jobs? Do these political personalities have particular strengths in the fields of the economy and jobs building?
I think that if we consider 2022, so let's say, I will answer I will just preface my answer by saying that we sort of lucked out into having the pandemic happen in the year before campaign season, because historically, if we look back in our previous election cycles, what usually happens is that spending picks up during the months leading up into the elections. So anytime from June of 2021 up until May of 2022, spending demand will pick up, and that is a sizable boost to our economy, and that is something that we can hope for in the coming year. Insofar as the names that are popping up and the names that people are mentioning for 2022, I think that the pattern that sort of emerges with the selection of people of in terms of their predisposition for president, vice president, people appear to prefer candidates or rather names that have some level of executive experience, particularly local government executive experience. So the names that you have mentioned, they are all known, or at least partially known. They made their name, they established their reputation, at least in part because of their performance in their local executive roles. So you have Mayor Sara Duterte, Mayor Isko, and former Senator BBM was of course governor of Ilocos Norte several years back. So I think there is this tendency towards people who are from the executive, and that I think stems in part from the recognition of the executive being more hands-on, being more decisive, and of course that sort of sentiment is amplified or is given more heft by their experiences with President Duterte. So if I think we both could agree that regardless of what people may think of his candor, at the end of the day, a lot of people value his governance or choose to support him because of his perceived decisiveness. And again, that loops back to his record in governing Davao City.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes, so are we to understand that the 2022 elections is heavily dependent on President Duterte's support?
Ma'am, we do have some signs showing that if we look at we have some signs showing that President Duterte will exert some level of influence on the result, or his endorsement will have bearing. Mm-hmm. But given our recently released, so ma'am, I can pull it up.
Okay.
There we go. So if we look at the spread of names for in our predisposition survey, in our Pahayag end of the year survey, we find that there are a lot of names that can be viewed to be competitive. So there is, at this point in time, no clear front runner, but there are names that achieved some level of prominence, at least double digit. And you have, of course, Mayor Sara Duterte, as you mentioned, former Senator Bongbong Marcos, Mayor Isko, VP Robredo, and of course we have here Senator Pacquiao, Senator Poe, Senator Soto, or Senate President Soto, and of course Senator Go. So as I was saying earlier, the spread is very wide. We have a wide spread of names, but and there is no clear front runner at this point in time. Now, going back to your question, po, ma'am, would the endorsement of President Duterte matter in 2022? At this point in time, I would say yes, given that one, he maintains a high level of approval and trust. So that suggests that he, at this point in time, maintains a high level of political equity that he can leverage to in his endorsement of a candidate. The next sign would be that we find that 3 of the top 4 names are people that can be viewed to be, at the very least, friendly with the president. So there is that sort of alignment of support when it comes to supporting President Duterte and supporting these 3 candidates.
So, is there anyone in the opposition who is showing a strong influence or coming up to be a potential oppositor to the Duterte's political party?
At this point in time, ma'am, of course, VP Robredo has 10% for president, but as you can see in this particular graph, it is noted here that the names with 5% and below are not shown. So, insofar as your question is concerned, po, ma'am, only VP Robredo is popping up as a candidate from the opposition, or at the very least, those that are not firmly aligned with, say, President Duterte, or those who are visibly opposed to President Duterte.
Okay. So does the survey also infer any perceived weakness of the current administration, which could weaken its influence in 2022?
The Duterte's administration success in 2021 and perhaps more importantly in 2022 would depend on their handling of the distribution of the COVID vaccine and the economic recovery of the Philippines. If they succeed in rolling out the COVID vaccine, or if it can be viewed widely as a success, it does not need to be 100% rolled out. But if the majority receive it and it does not encounter any controversies or issues,
yes,
then that would be a major win for the administration.
True.
Another factor would be the economy. If more unemployed and more underemployed people find jobs in 2021 and the first quarter of 2022, then the Duterte administration and its chosen candidates will have momentum heading into 2022. So these are the two, at least at this point in time, the two critical issues that would exert an outsized influence on the strength, so to speak, the political strength of the Duterte administration and its allies.
In the which brings me to my next question. In the U.S. U.S. President Trump's COVID response was a factor in his loss. COVID response here also be a factor as what happened in the U.S. as you were saying, yeah.
First off, ma'am, I would think that the COVID response here was relatively well received. We have been tracking approval ratings of major national government agencies, as I mentioned, since the start of the pandemic, and they have remained high. Of course, you have the DOH and the DepEd, as I mentioned earlier, with relatively high disapproval, but approval remains high. So I would think that it shifts now from the handling of the COVID, because we would have 2021 and the first part of 2022 to consider. So it will likely be a year to a year and a half removed from the brunt of the pandemic. So it's not going to be like the immediate response to the pandemic that people will be reacting to. It will be the recovery. So it goes back to what I was saying. It will be the Duterte administration, its performance will be gauged by voters in 2022 based on the manner in which they instituted policies that would allow the economy to recover and roll out the vaccine. So they would not be particularly graded on the basis of how they performed in the first months of the pandemic, but rather how they performed during what many would see as the recovery post first wave of the pandemic.
So it's apparent that the main driver for the Filipinos' prospects for 2021 is the COVID-19 situation and how it is being handled. And that on your survey, 79.9% viewed COVID-19 as a very dangerous threat.
Opo, ma'am. And another 14% po as let me just check out. Mataas rin po kasi yung next level. So these are the ones who view COVID as a very high threat. Moderately dangerous is 14. So for a total of over 90% po, ma'am. Close to 95%.
So Filipinos also want the president to focus on COVID-19, the economy, jobs, above all the concerns beating corruption, poverty, and drugs. So why does it reflect in the data that the Filipino households' prospects are very hopeful for the improvement, registering at 32.3 for major improvement of financial prospects, and at a minimum of improvement at 44.8%. Isn't there somewhat a disparity there?
Ma'am, I don't think that there is, po, because if you consider hope or financial prospects, you have to consider what their base is. So what is their reference point? If, for example, they are underemployed or they're unemployed at the moment, they are looking at 2021 with more opportunities on the horizon. So they are thinking that any job, any opportunity heading into 2021, if they can avail of that, if they can get that job, if they can get that opportunity, it would be better than their current situation. What is important there is to consider their reference point. If they are already down, if they are already in a bad position, then most anything would be viewed as an improvement. So that is something that could be what is causing them to indicate that they are hopeful, or that or make them say that their prospects, their personal financial prospects, will improve. I mean, if you're out of work right now, any slight improvement, any job would be an improvement over having no job.
But Dr. Yap, as we know, companies are laying off and putting employees on furlough. Economic prospects are dim. So how do we explain this hopefulness?
Well, for starters, ma'am, it's usually the case that people find a sense of hopefulness with the coming new year. And beyond that, I would think that the imminent rollout of things like the Bayanihan Act 2, the supposed imminent arrival of the vaccine, and the adjustments made by private firms in terms of hiring, they would think that there would be more opportunities that are coming their way. At least better, at least more numerous than what they faced in the first few months of the pandemic. So if you compare, for example, when firms started laying off when the economy was caught flat-footed in May, June, July, and firms had to lay off people because of several months of severe lockdowns, I would think that if they consider what is to come in 2021, those prospects would be at the very least a bit brighter, as they would no longer have to contend with in total lockdowns like what we experienced in the first few weeks of the pandemic. And I think people now have a sense of they now have a grasp of what to do. Parang alam na nila kung ano yung pwede nilang gawin. This pandemic isn't as mysterious as it was before. And also, ma'am, at the end of the day, especially if you're in Metro Manila, I'm sure you've seen this during the holiday season. The traffic was pretty bad.
Yes.
And when people see that, parang people get the sense that parang maybe the economy is recovering. You see people going into malls. You see people going into groceries. It's not as malls and groceries are not as crowded as they were in previous holiday seasons, but if you compare it to the volume of people that were frequenting these public places during the height of the pandemic, I mean, when malls first started opening post-pandemic, these are welcome signs, and these help lend people some hope for 2021.
That's true. Does the survey also show that Filipino politics is still personality based, or have we progressed to issues as the main driver for the decision making in elections?
Well, ma'am, I think all politics is personality based, not just in the Philippines. Research has shown that people. There was actually this very interesting set of research papers that showed that people don't actually have this list of. Most people don't actually have a list of traits or issues. Most people don't have a checklist of issues or traits that they tick off and they compare to prospective candidates. What they actually do is that they have their own internal biases based on their personality, their emotional state, their past experiences, and they sort of reverse the process. They pick out their names based on their personality traits, their personal biases, and their emotional states, and then they rationalize it by picking out the best parts of their chosen candidates and sort of saying that, this person satisfies these traits that are positive, that are desirable. At the end of the day, for most people, the pull of emotion, the pull of our internal biases, these are pretty strong forces, and it's interesting to know that if we consider a rational voter to be one who only looks at the issues and like the track records and achievements, there's like this rubric of achievements, of plans, of experiences that candidates have to tick off. If those are the kinds of rational voters, if they're only looking at issues, then I would not bet against having a majority of rational voters. I would think that it would be exceedingly rare to find purely rational voters running around.
And we'll continue with our third part of the interview with Dr. Yap tomorrow here on ASEAN in Focus. Thank you again, Charlene, for joining me today, for helping me out, even if just for a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much, Alma, and thank you for watching, everyone. So this has been Charlene Navaja, reporting live from Hanoi, Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.